Hello, Ricky. Hey, Brian.
Hey, Jonah.
Hi. Hey there, Richard. I see Brian and Richard are joining too. Hey, good to see you, Ricky. Hmm.
Costume all day.
Pardon?
Costume all day.
Yeah, I know I put it on for this. I've had like three costumes this year. My first costume was a Queen of Hearts with like a bunch of playing cards and a playing card jacket and cards taped all over me. And my second was a mystic, and now I'm like a kind of a pilgrim vampire hunter priest or something. I'm not exactly sure what you would call this. I'm like half Solomon Kane, half pilgrim undertaker. I don't know what it is, but I'm having fun with it.
Saw your mystic. That was a good one. The
Yeah,
fortune looked like a
yeah,
fortune teller.
that was fun. Yeah, and I had a prop that wasn't even in that photo. My prop was like a little miniature mystic guy that I had with me. Hey, Richard, Brandy, I see you're both on there. Hi, Nancy. Thanks for joining. So yeah, it's been a fun Halloween weekend here in Santa Fe. I mean, Halloween is really a big deal here. So I don't know about. Hey, Brian, did you get up to anything this weekend?
No, I was just laying low. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I started getting sick, so I've taken it easy. But I managed to get a little bit of Halloween shenanigans in first. And I went to the Madrid Cemetery Party. There's a big annual party in the town of Madrid, which is a small town that they'll correct you if you say Madrid. They do not like that. It's Madrid, even though it's spelled the same way. And they have this cemetery there, and they have an annual dance party for Halloween, and so that was pretty wild. But yeah, so today the topic is the centers, and I wanted to do a more of an open discussion just because I'm kind of going easy on my throat a little bit. So I'm going to let other people talk as much as they are willing to. And also because I'm starting my class on the centers next week, I'm really excited. I have a 10-week course starting, and that's actually been kind of nice. I hate to say nice being sick, but like it's been an excuse to lay around in bed with a pen and paper and just write down. It's an excuse to turn inward. I've been working so much in the outer world, and so it's nice to like actually go into that creative space. What do I want the next 10 weeks class to be like? But I thought today we could just talk about the centers in general, and we could share things we've learned, either having a center defined ourselves, how we've learned what it's like having that center. If that center is your authority center, what is that like to you? What is your experience of your own authority? If you don't have that center defined, what's it been like since you learned human design, noticing that? Um, because that's actually how I'm going to start the class next week for the centers class. Our first class is going to be on the solar plexus, because that's just such an obvious one. I mean, for people who are first coming into human design, if you have a defined solar plexus, that is your authority. And if you don't, that is probably going to be one of the main things you can notice to track in the people in your life. Like even before the difference between projectors and generators, I mean, even before manifestors, or, these things are big differences, but just noticing the difference if you're undefined or if you're defined, I mean, that is so powerful for the solar plexus. But that's just one example. I mean, I'd be happy to talk about any center. So the topic is the centers, what we have learned, what we have noticed from that. And I know, Brian, you're kind of a newcomer to human design. I'd be curious. You've been such a good student. You've been like doing this amazing. I've seen your journals and your notes, and you've been like really, I mean, like so diligent. So,
Yeah, yeah. I've been getting after it. I've been kind of like updating everything on what planets they correlate with in the line and which house it is in my natal chart and all of that.
I
I,
was
I've
so
been kind of
impressed. Yeah, I got to take a
getting,
look and I saw your notes, pages and pages of notes, and really copious notes.
yeah.
Hi, Shri. I see you've joined as well. Love that picture. The topic is the centers. Hey, yeah, the topic is the centers, and we're just kind of going to have an open discussion to share what we've noticed in the centers. So I was asking Brian, like, being relatively new to human design, are there any centers that you've learned a lot about, or that you've noticed being defined in others that you have undefined, or that you've noticed in yourself that you've learned about? You
Yeah,
are, yeah, you're a manifesting generator with, you also have
I've had
ego and
sacral
solar
authority.
plexus. Yeah.
Yeah. My all four parts of the integration circuit are all connected for me as well. So it actually takes like a lot of like with my particular design, is it takes a lot of reflection to figure out when I'm being influenced by someone else. It's kind of hard. It's kind of hard for me to
Because with the
notice.
whole integration bundle, you automatically are going to have throat, G center, sacral, spleen. Then you also have ego and solar plexus. Do you or no?
I always get it mixed up if
You have
it's the
ego. I know
solar
you have ego.
plexus or the spleen, and I
Well, you know,
believe
you
it's
definitely have the spleen defined. So maybe you have the solar
so.
plexus.
No, yeah. I have the open solar plexus, and yeah, that one. I feel I notice it more if people are like angry or sad around me. I'll amplify that.
Mm-hmm.
Especially when it comes to anger. If I'm having a disagreement with someone and they're at like a 4, I'm at a 10.
Ah, like it
You
really
know?
keeps you up. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm looking to see if I have your chart. If you want to text it to me at some point, it doesn't have to be now, but I could show it. I could run it real quick and show it to
Okay.
people.
Yeah.
Just or your birth time or anything.
Let me send that over. I'm
But
opening it
yeah,
up.
having an open solar plexus, even with those other centers defined, I mean, you're gonna naturally synchronize to people and to their where they are, to where they are in the wave, and you're just gonna have this synchronizing quality where it can be really confusing if you have two different. Hi there, Lasita. How's it going? It's nice if they're in sync with each other. Like if you have two people who are both emotionally defined, it can be hard to know which one to synchronize to with the undefined solar plexus. I mean, it's something that you kind of just automatically do. And so if somebody's really down in the dumps, you'll just automatically console them. Or if they're really amped up, you'll just automatically share in that excitement. But it can be really jarring if you're consoling someone and someone else comes along who's really excited, and suddenly you have this like,
Mhm.
who do I connect with kind of thing. So the topic today is the centers, and we're just doing a group discussion to all share our own experiences, what we've learned. I was asking Brian first because he's relatively new to human design, and what centers he's really noticed or what he's learned most about, either a center he has defined or one he has undefined. We're just talking about the solar plexus, which is undefined for him. And he's going to share me his chart as well. And,
Yeah, I just texted over to you.
great. Okay. I
Uh,
should get it in just a moment.
yeah. And then yeah, I also have undefined head and ajna, and I really haven't done a lot of reflection on that to see how I'm influenced. But the only thing that I would say is like um mm, feel like yeah, if I'm in an environment where I'm doing something and people are like really focused, like if everyone there is like super focused on what's going on, then I can tune into that. But if there's any sort of distraction, then I can get kind of a little off course.
Mhm. Yeah, there can be a lot of pressure with that, and there can also be just you can find yourself just thinking about what's really important to someone else. Like I lived with a guy who was a college student, really into these obscure philosophers, and every day he would be telling me about his thesis and his different essays he was working on, and pretty soon, without really caring about that stuff myself, they suddenly had all these opinions, and I'd be like, well, actually, what about this and what about that? And
Oh,
it was funny to notice. It's like something that I wouldn't have any interest in my own. But I mean, there's also the positive side of it. It's not just oh no, I'm getting pulled into his world, there's also the, oh, that's cool, I can actually get pulled into someone else's world, someone's world that I might not have otherwise gotten to experience.
Yeah, I just remembered something you said probably like a few weeks back. It's like people with that open head center. It's like you can go to any page in the thesaurus
Mm.
and get right into that subject there, whereas someone who would be defined as more likely to be fixed on whatever they're into.
Yeah, they have their own mental world that they're pulling you into, and when you're open in that way, it's kind of like you can get pulled into others' worlds, like just like the open G center can get pulled into somebody's world, or the open, the open emotional center, the solar plexus, we get pulled into their, emotional world. So really it is, yeah, it's not so different. Well, I'd love to open up the conversation if anyone wants to chat either with Brian about centers, or I know Randy, I saw you and Richard do a great presentation on the defined solar plexus. I know you have undefined solar plexus, and then Richard has it defined. So that's always a fun topic. But I'm going to give my voice a rest a little bit. I'm still in the ginger and honey mode of recovering from my fall
Some
cold.
cinnamon to it, anti-inflammatory. My experience with the solar plexus, growing up in human design has been, I had a beautiful teacher, and he was my son, and he's emotionally defined, very heavily emotionally defined. And at the beginning of our experiment, I say, because he was the only child at home when I found human design. So we started experimenting together. And as an emotionally defined human, I would get hijacked, I called it, by his wave all the time, and try to fix him in one way or another. Try to make it, I mean, he's a 1-3, I'm a 6-2. I wanted perfected form, I wanted these things in a certain kind of way, and I realized doing that was really robbing him of a lot of experience. So we came up with a tool in which he could tell when I was hijacked by his emotions easier than I could, right? I'm amplifying and I'm wrapped up and I'm making choices based on the way he felt, instead of using my authority. And so we had this code word that we'd use, and it was hippopotamus. And eventually, as soon as he got brave enough to say, "Hey, mama, hippopotamus," I programmed, myself to remember who I was, and take a look at my design, take 10 minutes out, really come outside of his aura so that I can really feel the energy of my body and make decisions from that place. That was a beautiful tool. And he was a beautiful teacher in being able to stay sovereign in my own strategy and authority, still taste the emotional wave. And now, in relating the taste of Richard's emotional wave, the experience of it is something I can tap into and have joy or not with. But I don't have to, but it's a beautiful experience to be an open solar plexus and have the experience of the emotional wave from the outside. And then to be able to, like I said today, like to bob and weave like a little chickmunk through what's healthy for me in the wave. I'm just back and forth with my splenic authority, really choosing what it is I engage in and what I don't, based on what's correct for my body, but still being able to experience it, knowing it's not personal, knowing it's not mine, and I don't need to create stories about it in one way or the other, expectations or stories. There it is.
Yeah, I'm just sharing your chart here, Randy, just so people can see.
And then in experiencing, from my perspective, experiencing the emotional wave from someone who has a lot of experience in design and in following his wave, what I can say is that the frequency of it in the high or the low, it doesn't hijack me when it's that clean. It's just quite an experience of the divine emotional frequency that's present. It's really clean when it's done with correctness, that emotional authority. And it's almost like I've got a little synesthesia in my body. So it's like the feeling of a beautiful song in my body, the emotional wave, whether it's high or whether it's low. When it's clean, it's beautiful and it feels like a symphony.
Yeah, that's a really good point, that it's not, I mean, it's kind of like when the two people meet, when the undefined and the defined meet, you can't really blame one or the other for the chemistry that comes out of it. It's going to, the byproduct is going to be a result of both of those chemistries. And so it might be that the person with the undefined solar plexus has such a clean way of taking it in, and the person with the defined solar plexus is so clear in their emotions, so they're putting out such a clean frequency, in the sense that, what do I mean by clean? They're not repressing things, they're not confused, they're not like emotionally dumping, but they're also not holding back, that they have a you know, a kind of a, they're in touch with their emotions, they're not hiding their emotions, they know what their emotions are, and they're not anxious about their emotions, they're not nervous about trying to hide them, or they're not nervous about having to get them out and having to dump them. And so both sides of it can be clean or not. Like somebody could be the most Zen monk of clean emotions in their emotional state, and then an undefined solar plexus who is really wrapped up in, you know, the anxiety and the nervousness of it, could really take that in such a amplified way that they blow out their own nervous system. Likewise, somebody who's in a state of complete chaos and absolutely their nervous system is blown out and has a defined solar plexus, someone with an undefined solar plexus can come along, and it's not that they can necessarily transmute that feeling immediately, but they can kind of act as a midwife or a shepherd for those emotions to help clarify them, to help through their own strategy and authority, and really being able to cut through that chaos and to confront the truth. And so, you know, I've personally experienced how going from being very afraid of confronting the truth to being more comfortable confronting the truth, how curative that is for the defined solar plexus. That helps cut through their chaos, because they can be in a really chaotic situation, and you say, look, here's what I'm feeling. You're not being honest with yourself about this, or you need to rest because, you know, not that the undefined solar plexus always knows what's best for the defined solar plexus, but that they do have a symbiotic relationship to each other.
Absolutely. What I found is, as a undefined solar plexus, it's almost like we're here to put language, or to help put language to the wave itself. And so I found in my practice that providing that emotional wheel has been invaluable to emotionally defined people, so that they can find the language of what it is that they're feeling and bring it to consciousness through language. Yeah, because feeling the depths of the coming together of the frequency, as he's being the wave, I'm collapsing the wave function in the moment and putting language to it and bringing it into form. And if I confront the confrontation of the feeling, I'll bring whatever that is into form. But if I'm afraid of it, it won't work. Thanks.
Yeah, like the way that you confront that. I mean, are you doing it out of fear and out of aggression and out of or is it a really clean way to go?
Yeah, is it open-hearted?
Oh, I see your comment there, Lisita. Yeah, I mean, okay, well, Richard, maybe you have some comments first, and then
yeah, for sure. I'll never forget when I first got my reading and this was shared with me, and the whole idea of patience. I was like, no way, like not a chance. Like MG, the concept of waiting not only for as a generator, but just this idea of a wave. It really struck me, but it didn't take very long. You know, I left the reading, I remember, over the next couple of weeks, and really tried to watch and be aware. And just to say that it didn't take a long time for me to come around to the concept. And I was like, oh, I was so convinced, you know, the low end, it drove me so hard. You know, when I would be in the low end prior to human design, I was convinced it was someone else's fault or some problem that I had to go fix. And right there at the peak low end, I was out there rearranging my life. And so I still say to this day that if this was the only piece of information I learned from human design, it would have changed my life. Just this information about the solar plexus and the fact that it's my inner authority. But now, after all these years, I love my wave. Like it just gives me such a sense of security, because even though it can go up and down as it does, and the low winds are really never comfortable. I mean, there's still that pressure of a low wind to not want to have to sit there and try to be comfortable with these difficult emotions. I have so much trust in it now, so it's just automatic. When that anxiety, that physical tension of a low wind is coming on, there's immediate light that goes off. And I just know to slow down, take some deep breaths. Okay, I don't know how long it's going to last. I know it's going to move sometime either by the end of the day or by the next morning. I always know I'm going to be in a different space. And so it's just been a revolutionary shift in consciousness and awareness to come around and have that kind of trust in it. So now, instead of having any mental anxiety about it, the physical is going to be what it is, but just to know that I have to give myself time. Like whatever the problem is, ride this out. And the more I can be present with it. And what I feel like is the low end now is where I really actually get most of the truth that I may be seeking. And that's why stopping whatever I'm doing and being present to those emotions and just letting it pass, it's adding half of my story with whatever's going on in my life. And so, like I said, it's just been a complete 180 to my appreciation, because I know that with more time, I'm going to get more awareness. It's just purely a time-oriented process. And so again, my life has changed completely as a result of understanding this inner authority.
Mm-hmm.
And I also can say that it also is very connected to my undefined centers, right? So gate 47, which can be my mental trip where I'm just like a hamster on a wheel going around and around. At the lower end, that gets amplified, right? And the same with my undefined ego. At the low end is when in the past I could feel myself really reaching out in front of me, trying to take control of something, all eventually to my own detriment. I mean, these situations typically never worked out very well. But there's just so many layers, because that is the inner authority and how connected it is to what's coming in from the undefined centers. It just highlights the encouragement for taking time and patience. And the same for the high end. Let me just say one last thing, John, about that. The high end, I would cause just as much issues for myself, because at the high end is when I would overdo everything, constantly overcommitting, overspending, just throwing things against the wall, hoping they would stick. And then again, a week later, having to deal with all the things I had constructed, going, why did I do that? Why did I say yes to this person? So for anyone that is emotionally defined, for me, this is where everything starts. And it's where everything will always come back to. I mean, it's the one most important solid ground to learn to embrace and be aware and appreciate the wave, however it's operating, whatever cycles it goes through, and it can be based on different gates and channels. But I have found that even though we can kind of point in the direction of that by looking at someone's definition in a defined solar plexus, we might be able to give some tips to support what that wave may or may not look like in terms of spikes or collective. And, we have these things we can share, but at the end of the day, it's just for a defined solar plexus person, just begin monitoring it. I think writing about it each day helps a lot, because that can help us connect with it. And then if you journal a little bit each day and then look back at the end of the week, boy, will you see that perspective change. Like up here, everything's a yes and a heck yeah. Down in the low end, everything's a hell no. But eventually there is some settling, and the clarity can emerge, and it is a physical felt sense. This is not a mental trip. The mind is always talking about it up here. It's always doing its little thing, but it is the nervous system. There is a settling of that. And the words I use now, when I have a process, I need to make a decision. I have no idea how long it's going to take. Again, that was something that took a long time to get comfortable with, that either I was pressured by the other person or there was whatever deadline I've got to know, I just don't follow those things now. Like it just doesn't work for me. So I can't ever know how long something's going to take, but I definitely know what the physical feeling is of when I've arrived. And it becomes this timing where I'm physically resolute. Like my body just feels like I've been over this enough. I've slept on it enough, whether it was days or weeks. Some decisions have taken me years to make, but there just comes a space in my body when it's like, okay, I'm done. This decision is made. And what I love about that feeling is that I'm no longer attached to the outcome. Whether I'm going to say yes or no to a decision, I really don't care anymore. I just know that I'm going forward with it. I'm going to start this new cycle, whatever it might be. And I feel like it's for me, even though it might have some challenges or bumps or whatever, I'm committed to it. And so again, that just brings a great sense of relief and trust in the process. And it's been revolutionary for me.
Richard, I got a question for you. What have you noticed in particular about your defined solar plexus and your undefined G? What's really?
Oh, he has a defined G.
Yeah.
Oh,
I can share, and this is I also ran your chart here, Brian. So
was it the heart?
Yeah,
right,
open ego.
right, the ego center. Yeah, here,
Ego
let me
center.
switch back to
Yeah. Ego.
yeah, right there.
Yeah. What have you noticed about that?
So because that is my only undefined center below the throat, so much of my life history and story has been tied up in this receptive center here. Okay. The resources have always been a challenge for me. So I spent a great deal of the first part of my life chasing resources. Like it never felt like enough. I never knew what enough was. Whether I had money in my bank account, some people might say, oh, you've got plenty. I never felt like it was enough. And then if there wasn't any, then I was really stressed out. So everything, the ego is so much about resources on the material plane. And so that was always a struggle. And so at the low end, I'd have a lot of anxiety. Am I working hard enough? Am I in the right job? Am I doing enough? How do I do more? So again, with lack of awareness of how the wave works, I was having a lot of issues with my undefined ego. And then again, in relationships, same kind of thing. At the low end, I would just, I was a pretty good person, I think. I was never like an evil person, but like in a relationship in the low end, I would take on this control thing that was pretty ugly. And it could be verbally challenging because I have the 36-35. So I speak emotionally normally. You can hear it now. Like whenever I talk, it's never monotone like this. It's either kind of down here, up here. My voice actually kind of alerts me if I'm not already aware of my wave, even though for me, my channels that define it, the 59.6 is conscious, which does tend to indicate that a conscious channel defining the solar plexus, we would be more aware of it. But even if I'm not paying attention and all of a sudden the phone rings and I start talking to somebody, I can hear where I'm at. But just to go back to the relationship thing, I was a verbally challenging person because I would just this control, like, you've got to do this. It was always someone else's fault, whether it was a partner or a coworker or my boss. I really made life very difficult for myself by acting out at inappropriate times from the wave, but through the ego center, trying to really enforce something onto other people because I was blaming other people. And again, it's just been such a relief. And so like I'm sharing now and it does take time. There's no way to get there without giving ourselves time, the idea of the deconditioning process and all that. But you can experience immediate results. And the auto response for me now is just, okay, slow down, see how this looks tomorrow. I try in the low end, I just don't make commitments. I table everything till the next day. If I need to have a difficult conversation, no matter if it was an appointment or whatever, I just have to move it. And the other thing that I find helpful is for other people that are not into human design, I try to help coach them up to help me. And we can all get better at that, where we can help others support us. And so in an engagement like that, I'll let people know, hey, sounds like a great idea. I'm not sure I'll be able to tell you when you need to know. I'll do the best I can, but I'm really going to have to take my time. And even little things like that are setting people up to help us and give us that time, because for the defined solar plexus, we can't put a clock on it. It just simply doesn't work that way. But we have to help others help us in that regard.
I really appreciate that. It just really piqued my curiosity there.
Do you want to jump in, Lisita? I know you had
I thought that Richard and Brandy, I really appreciated what you had to say, and I hadn't been recording at first, so I started a bit late, but I want to have, I'm going to put up my own version of the chart. Oh, you don't, do you allow screen sharing? Maybe you don't.
No, it should be fine. I think you have permission here. I can
disabled participant screen sharing.
Oh, here I can well,
you can grant you can make me a
should be able
co-host
to.
or
I've done it
something.
before. Let me
I think if you
Gotta
just
go
if
and-
you click
Allow.
on screen share, it should be an option to allow you to allow others, I think.
Okay, I'm screen share. Yeah, I've done it before.
with your administrative authority.
Yeah. Advanced
Okay.
Pretty
sharing.
official with that outfit on.
You know,
I'll
it's
tell you
not allowing me to change. There we go.
Yeah, I got my nice chart. I prefer it, and everyone can see the gates and lines more clearly. So my birth time is not absolute. My mother said you were born at noon, and she, of course, is like really sure about everything. But if I had been born 11 minutes earlier, the unconscious moon on 59 1 would have been on 29 line 6, and I wouldn't have been a generator, and I wouldn't have had emotional authority. So I was very concerned to know for sure. Who knows for sure anything, especially in England, because they don't record birth times. And the first person who showed me the chart was Yola, who was one of Ra's first students. And she was running a study group in our area. And she made a mistake. And she did it an hour early because she didn't take into account I was born June 1st, 1950 in London, England. And she didn't realize, she didn't account for summertime. So the first chart I ever saw was the splenic projector chart with the 4816 channel and no definition of the sacral or the solar plexus. Anyway, that felt completely wrong because I said, of course I'm emotionally defined. I mean, the term just seemed to describe me. So we then found out her mistake, and then we got closer to this chart, and then I had some rectification done from a man called Ignacio, who lives in Santa Fe. He's very brilliant. So if you haven't met him, Jonah, I recommend that you do. And he got me to about 1203, which is the time for this chart. And I can't get rid of that 59.1. There it is. It is partly unconscious. And it is possible that I do have some problems tuning into either being a generator or being emotionally defined. And, but I have a 24-hour up-down cycle. It started after a very serious car accident, which happened in 1990. I met Human Design in 1995. So I was already in a very severe up-down cycle by the time I met Human Design, which may be one reason why I thought, of course, I'm emotionally defined. Impossible that I'm not. And it's like a sleep disorder. One night I hardly sleep at all, and I'm really active and very talkative like today. And other times I've come to some of these catalyst meetings. When I'm down, I say almost nothing. I'm falling asleep while I'm listening to the meeting rather than being engaged. It's very severe, actually. And do I love it? No. I like the upside of the wave. I do not like the downside of the wave. I like the fact that I can use it as an excuse to not do readings, not do coachings. On my downside, I try to be as quiet and hermit-like as possible, and people will see my profile is the 5-2, which is all about being projected on and on. So I just hide away. The second line, unconscious, is like, just let me pretend I don't exist. I can just be in my room, or if I walk, I hope I won't bump into anybody. So the 5-2 even accentuates the up-down side of the wave. I'm going to stop. I think that's quite a mouthful to have delivered to everybody. Oh, somebody asked, what cross is it? It's the cross of identification. And I'm still trying to understand what the cross of identification means. I can also, with the 16-5, the Grinch is my sun position. Either I'm really enthusiastic about things or really don't want to have anything about it, and I'm really critical. So maybe it's whether I identify or don't identify. But the 5-2 has the 16-5 in my case. So does that help?
Yeah, it also is part of the cross of consciousness, of course, that 64-63.
My
Which,
Chiron return is on the cross of consciousness.
oh, interesting. Well, I think of the cross of consciousness as related to naming things in the Maya, and it could seem like almost identification. Yeah, we'd have to look more into what Ra was thinking when he came up with that name, but I could see it as well, and it's 3 parts logic. You only have one abstract. It's fully collective and 3 parts logic. So that's another interesting point about
And
it.
in his book, The Global Incarnation Index, he talks about needing fuel from other people and like money and getting grants and things like that.
That's something he often says about the 1648 when they don't have a motor also is no solo acts, or they're designed to be collaborative. And it makes sense. Needing fuel, logic is the most starved of energy. And so it's not like an experiential cross where there's energy for experience everywhere. Yeah.
And Ashley was noticing that I have 18 3 times. It's both my south nodes and my unconscious Mars, which is on 18-6 in exaltation. So that's something I'm super happy about. But the 18 is very critical, and I have to watch about giving people criticism without being invited, because I can be very unpopular.
Yeah, I have the same with that. I have the 1858 as well, split off from all my other definitions. So yeah, same thing. The low end to be, I'm always mindful, like, uh-oh.
Yeah, she doesn't have the 58, so it's not there's no joy in it. I guess you could say when there's 1858, it's really yeah, it's a continual life force energy of taking joy and improving. But yeah, having that hanging 18, there's always that
The man
potential.
I was married to had the 58 and the 52. So I was conditioned as a emotional manifesting generator in that composite, in that partnership.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, right? And that
And
also
it was
connects
really
to
energizing to me.
yeah.
So I wanted to be really successful in a career. And I was trying to be a doctor at that time, but I dropped out and decided I'd rather be a mother. And eventually a baby did come along. So we did succeed in that.
Well, if anyone else has comments, if they'd like to talk anymore, I mean, really the open topic is just the centers. So anything you've learned about centers.
Hey, this is Shri. I have some thoughts. hopefully you can hear me because I'm in a public space. But something interesting that was brought up by Peter Berv at the conference was how when you have, channels that have any part of it as unconscious, the whole channel becomes unconscious, and then those you might not identify as those centers actually being defined. And I have 2 channels in my chart, and both of them would then be unconscious. And I am a projector, an emotional projector, but I did find that in many ways I saw myself more as a reflector. Do you have any thoughts on that? Do other people
Well, maybe
experience?
Lucita might want to comment. My idea, I do have my own way of interpreting when half of a channel is unconscious, and it's not that the entire channel is unconscious. So that's a little different, in my understanding. I take it from Ra's work, he called it the poetry of keynoting, where he describes how to interpret. I'm looking for your body graph. I don't seem to have it here. So,
I
but
did want to
basically,
say,
it's okay. But yeah,
I wanted to
do you have
say,
comments, Lucita? Anything you'd like to share?
yeah, only people with no definition, conscious or unconscious, are reflectors, and we need
Yeah.
to really understand that. And yeah, when I said I wasn't sure about being a generator, I had to actually learn to be a generator. I went through many years of experimenting as a splenic projector and because I hated the idea that I had to wait a long time to make decisions if I had solar plexus authority. So I thought, okay, I'll try what it's like being a splenic projector and what it's like to wait for invitation and things like that. And I'm in relationship with Genoa, and often he would ask me questions and I'd say, ask me again tomorrow. And eventually he said, you have to be emotionally defined because you will give me a different answer tomorrow. So clearly this is my chart. I'm an emotional generator.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you can tell also, I mean, I don't know in your case, but people do experiment with it, like of course Aloknand Diaz, where at that time they didn't have types, they only had doers and non-doers, but he was told he was a non-doer, and then it got to the point where life kind of forced him into doing. And so life will eventually force you to live out your type. And I mean, especially when you're experimenting with this, if you don't live out your type, you're just going to get a lot of resistance. And so generators have to work and they have to be productive, or else that same life force energy that gives them the power to work will just eat them up inside and they'll die inside. So they have to drain their energy and pass out from exhaustion regularly to have life. And projectors have to be recognized to have life. They have to have others appreciate them and recognize them in some way. They have to get credit for it. I mean, the classic projector thing is feeling overlooked, feeling jilted, feeling completely ignored, and so on. And so you can really see the dynamics at a deep level based on what requirement life places on you for your life force to be nourished. Now, as far as the channels that are half conscious, what it really comes down to when it's half conscious is that the channel actually has 2 parts that make it what it is. But when you ask someone with it half conscious, they will tend to only tell you about one part of it. Mm-hmm. So 3740 is the bargain between basically all of the affection for other people and being part of the family, and then being alone. And it's a bargain that says, if you want to support each other, you have to give people their alone time, right? You have to, part of that bargain is you have to let them be alone. You have to let them have their own personal time, and you have to show that affection to them, and you have to show the support that way. Now, the whole channel is a part seeking a whole. It's all about being part of something bigger than you. So anyone with 3740 is going to acknowledge at some level this drive to be part of something bigger than them. But if you ask someone with the 37 conscious, they're going to say, well, it's really important that you show that affection and that you are there for each other to really, reward each other's hard work. They're not going to necessarily, appreciate how important it is to be alone as well. So in your case, you might just overlook that. Now, it's not to say you're permanently going to overlook it. It's unconscious. This is something that you realize as well. The unconscious simply appears at the same time for you as for everyone else, in the sense that in a bargain situation, you might suddenly realize, no, look, I don't have enough alone time. I'm going to start to spend Tuesdays and Thursdays in my own space doing this and that. You realize that, you come to that realization that you need more alone time, or that they need more alone time, or just that the bargain isn't working in some way. You realize it at the same time as everyone else does. It kind of appears fully formed from the unconscious. So it's not a, unconscious definition on the design side is not a sentence to ignorance. It's not that it's going to be unconscious forever. It's that it becomes conscious for you at the same time as everyone else. But you might just overlook its importance. And if anyone else has comments on how that 40 unconscious might look.
Yeah, well, just to say the same thing you're saying, I think, Jonah, is that with the unconscious defined solar plexus, any interaction is going to bring the awareness of where you might be in the wave. So little things, getting up in the morning, maybe you're by yourself, you're not maybe aware of where that wave may be, but you go to do something that you do every morning, maybe go to make coffee, and the coffee machine's broke. And all of a sudden that's kind of a big deal, and all of a sudden, oh, okay, well, that maybe I'm a little bit at the low end. If you were at the high end, it'd be like, who cares? I wanted to get a new coffee maker anyway. I'll grab coffee on the way to work. I just want to share that I think it's through interaction, as Jonah's saying, is that it comes to consciousness through the interaction, which can bring the awareness.
That's very true.
That's a great point. Yeah. And I guess, right. So yeah. So specifically any center that, now she does have a conscious hanging gate here, but I guess because it's still being fueled by the unconscious ego, it's fully unconscious ego. I mean, that could be like not necessarily realizing what you have the willpower for or what your desires are. Like they appear to you at the same time as or they appear through interaction. That's a great way to put it, Richard, is that the unconscious, it's not that you can never witness it. It's that you can't access it on your own. You kind of get to experience, wow, I guess I did feel that way and didn't realize I felt that way. Or you kind of can be sometimes, experiencing it. I mean, but as in terms of how we describe it, like, here's a good example. Mike has 2838, and he has the 28 unconscious and the 38 conscious. We know that channel is all about finding purpose in life, and that it has two parts. The 38 is the fighter that continues to persevere, and then the 28 takes risks. And for him, if you ask him how he found purpose in life, he'd say never give up. And he would only talk about the conscious side of the never give up side. He might not say you have to be willing to risk it all. Whereas somebody like myself, who has 28 conscious, will say, oh, to find purpose in life, you have to be willing to take a big risk. And if you play it safe your whole life, you're never going to, you're going to end up regretting that you didn't take that chance. So you can just see that the conscious side tends to be the side that we consciously accent with like our advice and our like this 1057. If you were to ask somebody 1057 how and what it's all about, how this is channel of perfected form, and this is really about knowing how to be yourself in a big way, and the perfection and the beauty of just not even making art but being art, living life as art, and having like this sort of inherent artistic way of expressing. And feel free to add more keynotes to that if anyone wants to add to that, Richard or Lucita or anyone. But I mean, with 10 here, this would really put the being yourself and acting according to yourself more than the knowing. It's kind of like, oh yeah, you just have to be yourself. Well, yeah, but can you be yourself if you're not necessarily like, people with hanging 10, yeah, they have their behavior and they behave as themselves, but they don't have the 57. 57 is needed, that intuition to know. It's like knowing who you are is different than just being who you are. And so this is the channel of what happens when you bring knowing who you are together with being who you are. That's maybe a little more of an of a far
I
reaching,
love
but it's not as
listening
obvious.
to you. I love listening to you, Jonah. I wanted to ask, is your name Shri?
Yes, that's it.
Do you identify as an intuitive person?
I do. Yeah. I mean, I question it at times. I could have have something to do with being unconscious, but overall, I would say yes, I do. Yeah. And it, yeah.
I'm not sure about how definite those distinctions are about the sides, but definitely you. I would encourage you to listen to your intuition more and more, and really trust that you are intuitive. Is all I wanted to add.
Thank you. And that was certainly a unique, like I hadn't heard that before. Also, back to how through interaction, I can see where I am on the wave. I hadn't heard that before. And that's definitely true, because I think about so when I was referring to how the unconscious, I kind of sometimes I don't identify with certain centers. Like I would, if someone asked me and I had no idea what my chart looked like, I would guess that I had an open G and an open will. I would more believe the 1057, but the other channel, I would be a little bit more surprised to find, because yeah, because on my own, I'm like, what is willpower? I have no will. Like, what's this? I've spent a lot of time contemplating will, also feeling like I need to prove myself in past, less so now after Saturn return. But it is very true that you say through interaction, that it comes up, because I think about people who, for instance, I have family members who live out in the forest by themselves. And I'm like, wow, like if I lived by myself out in the forest, I would have no accountability to anybody. And therefore I would just like compost into the earth, because there would be nothing I need to do. Like I don't have the will for myself. My willpower comes through other people.
It's also, I mean, you do have a hanging 51, but that channel, the life force energy that's fueling your heart center, is tribal, and it is through gate 40, which is a love gate, which is all about really the love of work and the love of working for others. It's deliverance. And so it's kind of like delivering the goods, the one who brings home the bacon, things like that. And the other thing is it loves working and then resting. So it's, I mean, it's funny to say loving work as a projector, but I do think it does. It loves working and then gaining the benefit of having worked, the fruits of the labors. It's not here to work day in, day out the way that the sacral works. The ego works once and profits forever. So by essentially doing something that can be resold or doing something that has lasting value. But yeah, I mean, seeing that 4037 as being tribal and being about being a part of the whole, and what bargain you make with others to really show your love for them by providing for them, and then in exchange the affection and all of that. So, and of course you have both sides of it. It's not that you will only, it's like in some cases you'll be the one delivering, and in other cases you'll be taken care of and be showing the affection for that. I mean, that's the tit for tat that the tribe is known for. What's fair, right? It's all about a fair bargain. So it could just be, yeah, instead of thinking of it in terms of being so willful and having such a strong willpower, you could think about it as having a strong sense of fairness. Or even one of the keynotes that Ra uses for the ego center, which is lesser known, is reason, having a strong sense of being reasonable, and what's a reasonable or an unreasonable deal. What's a bargain that you entered into that they're asking too much from you, or they're demanding too much.
Yeah, and the aloneness also made a lot of sense to me because in the past I was kind of thinking like typically I don't resonate that much with the tit for tat idea, but when you brought it into this concept of time alone versus time with people, it made a lot more sense. So thanks.
Yeah, which is a kind of a form of tit for tat. It's just, it doesn't sound, I mean, when you say tit for tat, it makes it sound petty, but it's much more just about fairness. I mean, you can make it sound as grand or as mundane, as you want, because fairness can also just be justice and having a strong sense of taking a stand against injustice or being really affronted when people are taken advantage of. And part of that is also the bargain of how much aloneness do they get. It's not fair that they're expecting people to work so much and not giving them enough time for themselves, things like that.
Oh yeah, I get very passionate about that subject.
Yeah. Well, I see a comment from Nancy. I'd like to read here. And I think I have Nancy's chart I can pull up. One moment here. Okay. So, oh, just a moment here. Perfect. So Nancy's comment, as soon as I share the chart, of course it loses the moment. Okay, here it is. New learning from my open solar plexus. I am the mountain of the dancing trees. Of is in quotes here. So I am the mountain of the dancing trees, but I am neither the tree nor the wind flirting with the tree. The more I am open to what's unmoving in the moving, the more I yield to the earth, the more I could hold the earthquake for the tree to play its emotional affair with the wind and thunder. The less I hold on to what's moving, air and water, the less I ignore what has always been here, mountain, earth, trees, and their connectivity to what's still unmoving, gravity. And so it's kind of, it's a really poetic way of kind of describing the experience of the emotion, but not being the emotion, I suppose. There's a few more comments here, and feel free to jump in as people wish. Wake Up Fairy, Christine says, if it's line 1, 2, or 3, isn't that gate in a channel not interested in the channel because it's caught up in its own process? She says her conscious 59-1 doesn't seem to care about her unconscious 6-5. It's too busy penetrating and investigating and worrying about conflict, friction, or making babies. Yeah, I mean, it's definitely, it's a question of how we can deconstruct at a practical level what that means, that a first, second, or third line activation is not going to be interested in the opposite. I guess you could say, like, for a hanging gate, in that case, maybe that person would be less on the prowl for the harmonic gate. When you have that channel connected, I mean, when that full channel is, when you have 2 activations, and there's a channel, I would imagine that is operating just like it does for anyone else, regardless if they're both first line or they're both sixth line or they're a combination of lower and upper trigram. Because when we're talking about how the channel operates, we're really talking at a level less about, I mean, it's kind of like what level we're talking about, like the seeking or the interest in the other side of it. I mean, yeah, there may be some, I'd be curious if you're able to tell a story of your own 59 and 6 and that channel of mating, and how like your 59-1 is less interested in the 6 side of it than vice versa. Excuse me. But I think it would just be, it's just a question of really how we turn that into something, into a story at the surface that actually holds true. And so I'm not sure that I've been able to do that myself. I mean, it might offer some explanation. I see it especially for hanging gates, where it might just be like, I mean, it's probably most obvious for personality sun in a hanging gate, where somebody has personality sun and they're a 1-3 or a 1-4 profile. So they have a first line personality sun. or a second line personality sun for that matter, particularly the first two lines, but I guess all lower trigram to a degree. And they're just not necessarily as aware that other people are out there who could help them in some way. Like their immediate reaction is this independent, I should figure it out myself, not I should call in my friends and see who else can solve it. That being said, I know plenty of 1-3s who, will call friends a lot for their help. They'll say, hey, I can't figure this out. What do I do about this? So it's not that just because you're a first line profile means you're not aware of other people are out there. I've just heard things like a really amazing 1-3 artist saying, are there like rich people out there who buy this stuff? Like just kind of having a low concept of mental modeling of other people who might, whereas like a fourth line can say, oh my God, this will sell. I know exactly how to sell this. So, I mean, I think we can extrapolate some from the idea that the first, second, and third lines are more self-absorbed, and the fourth, fifth, and sixth are looking out to the world. But it's always going to be kind of an effort of poetry to be able to turn that into something valid. I see a comment from Ricky here. As a defined solar plexus, she can sense the undefined solar plexus in others, and she wonders what other people sense in terms of undefined centers and the people they encounter. Yeah, what do you sense it as? As fakeness, as inauthenticity, or what do you nervousness? I don't know.
You're asking.
Yeah,
asking me
like what it feels like when
No,
you sense it. Okay.
They just seem cool, very cool. Like they run cool. Yeah,
That's okay. I see what you're saying.
Yeah, like it's almost a little bit like I want to engage them.
Like a little
And
flat or neutral, and you're kind of like
a little
wanting
flat.
to see what's
Like,
there. Like, can I poke them and get a little reaction out of them a little bit? Or
yeah.
Good. Well, I was being a little bit facetious, but not too facetious, because that, sometimes it does come across. I mean, I have undefined solar plexus, and I will still notice sometimes that when somebody's being really afraid of showing themselves, or you can just kind of pick up on this facade. But I mean, I don't want to generalize that it's only the undefined solar plexus that can do that. I think that's just part of human nature to hide. It's just that the defined solar plexus is kind of forced to fess up by their own life force energy, because they'll hide and then they'll have something inside of them that's like, okay, I have to be real. I can't keep hiding. I can't keep living a lie. I can't keep pretending.
Well, I'm talking about like more about people in my life who don't know anything about human design, and I'm just looking at their charts and just observing how they are, and it's like there's just a running cool element, versus
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, especially if they're splenically defined, but even without, I can totally see this running cool thing. I mean, look at Ra. He was so cool. Like he was.
And so this is my question, like that I threw out is like, I wonder, like, so I for example, I can't sense if someone has open name your center besides the solar plexus, which you led with, you know what I mean? And so I'm just curious what other people.
Yeah.
If they,
yeah. If anyone wants to jump in with that,
more
I mean,
I think it's easier to sense maybe definition rather than lack of definition in others, right? In other people.
I think it really depends on conditioning and where you've come from and what your nervous system can regulate itself to and what it cannot regulate itself to based on conditioning in childhood, I believe. I mean, really the senses that we have, the heightened nervous system senses that we have are due to staying safe, loved, and protected in the field. And so what I found in my practice is that the identifications, the way that people identify other people really tells me a lot about their own conditioning. Does that make any sense?
I also wanted to say, I would not have thought that Brandy was by any stretch of the imagination cold or cool or, I mean, I think of her as a very exuberant, warm human being. So, I mean, I can't tell whether people have defined or undefined centers. When I've guessed, I'm usually wrong.
So I guess what I'm asking is, it seems like we can like sense, you Jonah, you led with like, can we tell when we have these, can we sense our own definition or lack thereof, right? In this sentence.
Mhm. Well, yeah, and I mean, and I think like one of the big ones is going to be the solar plexus is probably going to be the easiest. I don't necessarily know that someone with a, I mean, you're saying as a defined solar plexus, you can really tell when someone has undefined, sometimes anyway.
Really
don't-
tell it. Yeah, and
Yeah. I don't doubt that. I would just say that there's certain cases of somebody who has a defined solar plexus where they seem really flat and neutral. Certain waves don't really feel very wavy, or don't really feel like they are that animated or that full of life. Like 1222 can often just be this plateau, or so can 3955, or other cases where you have multiple channels in the same two centers, like people who have 1949 and 3955 can seem really neutral because it's almost like those channels neutralize each other. So I can't always tell when someone's emotionally defined. But then I guess from your side of it, you're just saying when they're undefined, you notice a certain coolness to them. I mean, for me, the best way to tell is really if I actually feel it in my own body. And it's harder for me to tell where I am defined because I already have that going on. So I don't necessarily feel such a sacral buzz from other generators. I can still kind of tell sometimes. I mean,
I guess that was my main, I guess, question was, can anyone, does anyone have a sense of other people's definition
I feel like sometimes,
upon meeting them?
but every single time that I have collapsed my mind around what I think is in front of me, I have limited its possibility, and I have not really experienced the truth of it in its glory. I have only experienced it through the lens of my collapsed wave function, of my belief that I've placed on that person. And so yes, I think that at the beginning of my experiment, I tried to, see if I could figure it out, because I was in my mind about it and I wanted to categorize and make all my, build my lexicon of understanding. So I really wanted to have my mind to be able to figure that out. But what I realized in following in and following my body, sinking into this, is that the experience of who they are is far beyond whatever my mind could suppose.
Yeah. So,
I have
like what?
oh yeah, any other comments? I mean, my only comment is that I have a really good track record for guessing people's centers, even
Oh,
to the
yeah.
point where I once got all 9 centers for a guy. I mean, that was like one of the only times I really tried, actually. And I don't think it's outside of the realm of possibility. I mean, I think it's just a question of whether you're noticing it in your own body versus trying to recognize what it would look like as a person. Because I think to what Randy is saying, they can have a lot of different ways of expressing. And so it's very hard. It's more about almost about the reasons why they're doing that. Like someone could be really flat because they're trying really hard to keep their emotions inside. Or someone can be really flat because they're in a very neutral, calm, serene place and they don't have emotional definition. Or they do have emotional definition and they've just reached that 0 point of their wave for a period where it's not turbulent. So there's many different reasons why somebody could look a certain way. But I think when you feel it in your body, like projectors famously talk about the sacral buzz they feel. Well, that's totally real. I mean, it's not even that manifestors and reflectors wouldn't feel that buzz. I mean, we had a reflector at the event, Roger, who said that it took 3 weeks for that sacral buzz to get out of his system, that he absorbs so much sacral energy. So it's not that anyone with an undefined sacral is immune to it. Really, it's just noticing in your body what the other person is doing to you, And then if you can help them because of that, not necessarily that you need to, but maybe you're noticing that they have an undefined sacral and you're amping them up, and you can say, hey, you know, don't worry about it. I'm just going to go chill over here. Let's take 20 minutes and then reconvene. And you give them a little space to decompress. Or noticing that, right? I mean, I don't often notice the centers I already have. Like, I notice when I've run out of steam and I'm like, okay, this is enough. I'm ready for bed. You know, I notice when I'm ready to leave the party. I don't really help my fellow generators, my fellow MGs and generators in that regard, because I just trust that they will figure that out for themselves. And I don't even necessarily try, you know, it's usually the centers that I have undefined are the ones where most of the action is, because the centers I have defined, I'm just kind of living out. And so I'm not really observing a lot in those areas, but I observe a lot in the solar plexus. I observe a lot in the ego. I can tell when someone's getting touchy or offended, and I can be kind of an ego whisperer and say, hey, let's calm down. Let's not go that way with it. You know, I can notice, like, yeah, the open centers that I have in my chart are they tend to be where I see the most action and I witness most what's going on, and kind of the life plays out outside of me, because the centers I have defined is where the life is playing out inside of me.
Yeah, I mean, the defined centers are how you show up. The undefined centers are what you meet in the world. You
Yeah,
know,
that's a great way of putting it. I completely, that's exactly what I experience. It's kind of, yeah, when I encounter other people and when I encounter any problem or anything at all, it's typically in the openness. So
and I find that through the openness is where I live. You know, being who I be in my defined centers is all wonderful and great, but there's no reason to be in a vacuum. The undefined centers is how my defined centers get to experience life.
yeah, there's a lot going on there. It's where a lot of the story is. A couple more comments. So Lazita says that she has the same lines as you, Wake Up Fairy. She has unconscious moon and 59-1 and conscious Mars, gate 6, line 5. And then Nathan says he likes the tribal keynote of reciprocity. That is such a good way to put it. That if there's no reciprocity, then are you really friends? Are you really, you know, bonded in that way? And then Lasita says, please do share Ricky and Wake Up Fairy when there's an opening. Yeah, if you'd like to share anything else, Ricky, I didn't mean to cut off if there's anything else you wanted to share. And then, yeah.
Just because I'm also relatively new to human design. And I'm just curious about the consensus of about what people can sense. You know, we're perceiving each other's auras all the time. I was just curious to see what everyone else thought about
Yeah, well, I mean,
perceiving.
I definitely feel the openness. It's harder for me. I think in the case where I was able to guess all 9 centers correctly, which were defined and undefined, it was harder for me with the centers I already have. That was somebody who had a defined root, sacral, G center, and spleen. And I have a defined root, sacral, and G center. So everything else he had was open except for the spleen. So most of my guesses were that he was undefined there. And that was tricky for me because I wasn't necessarily feeling a strong emotional wave from him, but it's like I was guessing he had an undefined solar plexus because I wasn't feeling that strong emotionality. But like with his ego, he was really touchy and amped up and aggressive. And I could have just as easily guessed that he had a defined ego, because I do get that intensity sometimes from defined egos. I just guessed he had an undefined ego because it seemed like he was being really triggered and not really like, I don't know how to describe it. I just didn't feel it as his own sense of ego. Like sometimes defined egos, I actually get the sense they don't want to be bothered to prove something because they're always being forced to prove something. So they end up being resistant to proving, and he was a little overly he was overly eager to use his ego. It's like it was kind of something that he was. So in that case, I was able to guess all 9 correctly, and it was kind of a parlor trick because I mean I didn't really want to, but it was something where it was ultimately the path of least resistance, where this guy was just hassling me, and he's like, "Okay, come on, if this is real, you should be able to tell me what my centers are, not looking at my chart." And I was like, okay, let's do it. And I got all 9 correct. And I guessed the 4 he had defined and the 5 he had undefined. And so that was something, but at the same time, it's like sometimes I'll get a hit like, okay, I recognize that. I recognize they have gate 22. I don't even recognize if they have a defined or undefined solar plexus. I just recognize they have gate 22 because I have 12. And my 12 knows what 22 feels like. It's not going to recognize it on Zoom. It's not going to recognize it on the phone. It's going to be when I'm sitting there and I turn to them and go, "Oh, you have gate 22, don't you?" In my head, I start to, and sometimes that's weeks after I've met that person, and it can sneak up on you. It's not like I immediately meet them and immediately know that. It's just at a certain point, the energy builds up and it crosses that threshold into consciousness. And I go, I remember this. I remember the last time this happened. I remember all the other times this has happened, because this does give you a vocabulary for starting to recognize certain electromagnetics, certain feelings you're going to get, and so on. So it's not that I can really do it on command, but I certainly do get correct perceptions, as I think all of us do, whether or not we put words to them. Those perceptions do arise, and sometimes I'm able to just hit it on the head, but a lot of times it's something that I just kind of eventually my curiosity gets the best of me, and I'll say, because that's the other thing is I've tried, or not even really tried, but I've stopped trying to figure out what everybody's charts are. And so I'll often know somebody for a really long time and not actually know their body graph. Then when I do see it, I'm like, oh, that makes so much sense. Oh, that's what I've been feeling this whole time. Oh, of course, that's what it is. It'll be an explanation, but it's not something that I know ahead of time. Well, I'm going to defer to anyone else who wants to talk the rest of the time, because my undefined throat, each of the undefined centers has its own version of when enough is enough. And my undefined throat is telling me I've talked enough today, but
there are a few people who haven't said anything yet.
Yeah, I'd love to hear from
I'm
them.
sure Nathan has lots to say, and I haven't actually met you in person. We've communicated online for a while. I'd love to meet you. If you respond to that. Otherwise, wake up, fairy. I did write you a private message, but I'll say it out loud. I recommend the Wild Mind writing that Richard recommended, and you may see the wave in action, but it could take months to show up. Some people's waves are really, really slow. So they can be up for 3, 4, 5 months at a time and then go down in their wave. And my mother would have long periods of up and then become suicidal and disappear from view or scream at me and all that. But it's not, most people don't have it every other day like me.
Well, I would love to hear from Nathan or Christine or anyone else who'd like to comment. And thank you for sharing that. That's a good reminder, Lisita. And I'm sorry to hear you went through that, but it shows that the emotional wave can bring us all of the pleasure in life as well as the pain. And there can be quite a lot of chaos from people who either put out the emotional wave or who amplify it and don't necessarily have the serenity to allow it to move. There's a lot of things that it can build up and explode, or it can out in really distorted ways. Did you have any comments, Christine? Would you like to comment?
So yeah, my emotional wave, I have like no access to it. I just know that like maybe once a year I have a complete crying fit, which supposedly is my gate 30. And then occasionally I have the melancholy of 5720. But aside from that, I really don't know. And I may have like a raging, screaming, like levitating off the floor fit like once every 10 years. So I don't know if I was just that flat or if I just don't notice it. I mean, I've had at least one client crying on my massage table when I was really sad, but I was going through like a serious 5-1 blowout. Like my whole tribe got snatched out from under me moment. So like a serious sad, which like I don't get sad that often. I consider emotions like, oh, that's for girls, and I don't do that. I don't cry in movies. I don't this, I don't that, or maybe that's my 5-1. I don't know. So, but I was talking to a lock about it, and he was like, no, you're walking conflict and visceral irrationality, and you've got to wave all the time, and this and that. And I'm like, okay, you say so. I have no idea. So I don't know.
Well, striving to hide the wave or saying, kind of a toughness of like, I'm not the kind of person who cries and this and that, isn't going to change. I mean, it can change how the wave expresses itself, but it's just going to build up and it's going to be felt internally. And even if it's ignored or pushed down, then other people will feel it. It's like, it's all ultimately, it has to go somewhere. So it's kind of what we experience internally, we get to experience it directly. And if we don't experience it internally, we experience it externally as fate. So what we have not internally confronted comes to us in conflict in the outside. So like when you're talking about having an explosion of being a 5-1 and having all these people in your life turn against you, all of that conflict being externalized could in some part be because you're not experiencing it internally. And the more you experience it internally and the more you process it, the less the external. Oh, we lost Nathan. Bummer. I wanted him to comment, but well, maybe next time we can get him on. But yeah, and it's not some sort of, there's no blame here. It's just what we experience internally sort of preempts the need for it to come to us outside. There's a great Jung quote to that effect. He said, what is not brought to consciousness comes to us as fate. So we have to bring the emotion to consciousness. We're not always aware of our emotions. And if we don't bring them to consciousness, then we experience them one way or another through interpersonal conflict and through people outside of us. And so, yeah, I'm a big fan of Jung's idea of the value of reflection and of basically experiencing and bringing sometimes painful aspects of ourselves to consciousness. I mean, like I was saying just a moment ago, the emotional center can bring a lot of pleasure, but it can also bring pain. So experiencing emotions can be very painful, but we are rewarded for our confrontation of that pain. And the reward is that we've experienced it internally, so it doesn't necessarily come to us from the outside. So I don't know if you have any thoughts on that, or if that's...
Ashley came on camera. Do you want to say something, Ashley?
Yeah, so I grew up with my mom just had 2 emotional channels. That's her only definition, 59.6 and 39.55. And what I've definitely learned through like the emotional being is whenever they try to force a high, like that's when things can be really uncomfortable. Like learning how to just honor your emotions wherever you're at. It doesn't matter where you're at, as long as you just like honor where that is.
Mm-hmm.
I have trouble with that as a massage therapist. I have to be happy for everybody.
Well, and then like you honoring that is what starts to develop a healthy emotional system and a healthy nervous system for yourself.
Yeah, I get to the point where I'm like, I need to have this cry, but I can't have it right now because I have clients. So,
yeah, this is Ashley.
But that again only happens like once a year.
Well, and the conflict between whether you can cry or not, or whether you can do anything or not, is ambivalence. And we all exist with ambivalence, but there's something called splitting, which is where we disavow the ambivalence. And it's just important to have a healthy attitude about the ambivalence, because all of us are going to contend with these contrary impulses. And so instead of saying, I want to cry, but I should not cry, you can just say, I want to cry and I want to not cry. And what this does is it affirms the ambivalence, because then we're no longer disavowing it. Anytime we say should, we're really disavowing a desire, and we're pretending that somebody else is desiring that. But you're still desiring it. Part of you wants to cry, part of you doesn't want to cry. And that's perfectly healthy and perfectly normal. And that's part of what it is to be an adult, is to deal with these ambivalent desires that we all go through, of wanting to show emotion, wanting to hide emotion, wanting to be yourself and wanting, yeah, that's very well said. Lisita said, we have many parts inside us all. Exactly. So, hey, Nancy, I see you're on screen now.
Yeah, when I heard you, Jonah, there is something just suddenly come out. My inner voice always there. It's almost like every openings, whether it's open center or open channels, there is this shame, the shame to share or not share, the shame to allow my temporary hotel to open to the guests to stay or not. So there is this shame of actually, yes, just because I can, but I don't feel like. There is this collective, not say judgment as a judgment, but natural judgment of I dislike the conditioning that you bring to me, not because of problem with you or me, but simply there is a no, but somehow there is a shame about that no, to be conditioned or not to be conditioned. So I feel there is this dilemma or the paradox constantly evolving with shame or the vanity of I want more of that. So there is this always counterplaying between every open center in that the shame of, oh, you are emotional, you are my daughter, but you are in the emotional wave. Maybe this moment my body respond with a no. Next moment maybe it's okay, but I can't be able to be consistent with my no or with my yes too, with my openness. There is not even logicalize the pattern. I can explain it. So I found fundamentally it's still about this individual to be living the experience with another species. If we are totally alone, there is not much of conflict to confront within yourself to deal with your shame. So for me, the shame is really a byproduct with the relationship is that kind of dance. And how do you be honest with that without necessarily needs to have that shame as a result of should be, there's the identity of a mother. I need to be here, support, even though my daughter might be having a very bad time in her life, but I'm still happy. I'm actually happy, even she's super sad. But then my mind still coming in to judge myself in an unconscious level. Yeah, so I found that when I heard everyone saying that kind of word about shame just coming out to me, yeah.
That's really well said, and I'd love to hear from Christine if she wants to. I have some comments on that as well, but I love to give my voice a rest and let anyone else who'd like to comment. So, do you have...
Not really sure where else to go with that. I had something and then I completely forgot what it was. Sorry about that. The 10-year thing. That's I think my ratchet. So like the biggest one was like something with my father and a lot of pent up stuff around like his relationship with my mother falling apart, and like on the day of his wedding to my stepmother, a whole lot of tension had been building, and then like my little brother did something and then we got in trouble, and then my dad was like, oh, I disown you too, and then I lost it. So it was like screaming, and like it was on a cruise, like in a dining room full of like 500 strangers and like the closest family, like banging my head on the table, like yelling at the top of my lungs, almost having like an out of body experience of like just 30 years of pent up like father daughter blah. So
Yeah, and as Nancy was saying, that conflict really emerged with other people. That there is always going to be the tension between you and them. And I mean, I would just add to that, from a psychoanalytic perspective, we only really get guilt and shame when we become speaking beings and when we gain the interiority of entering into language and all of this communication with others, because that's when we gain responsibility and expectations and all of this. And without going deep into the psychoanalytic tip, there is a beautiful formula, and I do appreciate what you were saying, Nancy, of how there is no formula to when you want to be open to the other or not. There's no formula, there's no consistency in the openness, and that one day you might be okay getting that, one day you might not. But there is a nice formula from the French psychoanalyst Jacques Lacan, where he said, the only thing we are guilty of is giving ground relative to our desire. And to really translate this, we have to understand desire not as conscious, but as what the desire of the form is, something similar to strategy and authority, like what your sacral desires, or what the projected life force energy desires to be recognized, what the manifester life force energy desires for peace. It's the desire, the true desire of the life force itself. And so the story from his practice about shame and guilt that is quite relevant is that there was a young couple who had just had a kid, and they were taking turns feeding or helping the daughter go back to sleep, or just when their daughter would cry, they would take turns getting out of bed to help her. Well, the man woke up one night hearing his daughter crying, and then he woke up his wife and had her go help the daughter. And the next day they had a big fight, and in therapy that week they tried to figure out what had happened. And the answer was that he had betrayed his own desire, self-betrayal, because his desire was to help his daughter. But instead, he thought, it's her turn, his wife's turn, I should wake her up. So it's funny. It's like it's like we attribute guilt to all sorts of things, but he had actually felt guilty over not helping his daughter in some weird way. The guilt was actually because he had betrayed his own desire. He really felt guilty for the self-betrayal of not doing what he wanted. So we can blame others quite often, we do, but our guilt actually stems from betraying ourselves. And so if we don't want to be open to someone, but we go along with it anyway, then we can end up feeling guilty for not being open enough for them, not doing enough for them. Or, oh, the shame I might feel over burdening you could actually be the misplaced shame that I feel over letting you burden me when I didn't want to. So it's this funny twist where the moment we have betrayed ourselves, we have produced an excess of guilt that must be given a reason for. And we often give the opposite reason for it. So I just thought you would appreciate that, Nancy, because it's kind of in the vein of what you were saying and how important it is to honor our inconsistency and our openness, and to not just expect to be there for somebody all the time. Yeah. Well, any final comments anyone has? If you have more comments, Christy.
Oh, that was profound. I mean, I really enjoyed listening to all of you. Thank you for sharing.
Yes, thank you all. I really enjoyed. I'm going to give my voice a rest. So unless there are any final comments, till next week, thank you all. Okay. Have a great night. Thank you.